to the entertainment Talking Sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. And in this video, I'm going to dive into the topic of free agency and the approach that I think the New York Giants should absolutely do. I'm going to talk about a tweet from Diana Rossini talking about the free agency market for the New York Giants. And much like most fan bases, everybody wants to go out there and get the next biggest piece. But much like most teams, they go out and do that on a year-in and year-out basis. It usually doesn't work. Traditionally, the smarter approach to free agency is to go out there and try to fill holes on your roster, much like the New York Giants did last year. They didn't go hog wild, and they spent 3-year contracts on a lot of players filling in holes. Guys like James Bradbury, guys now like Logan Ryan, who they gave a 3-year extension to, and guys obviously like Blake Martinez. A common misconception I see from a lot of people on Twitter and a lot of Giants fans, at least in my opinion, is that Dave Gettleman has not done a great job or a even decent job clearing up the cap space for the New York Giants, and they just look at this year's salary, which was supposed to be $35 to $40 million higher, and the pandemic ruined that. But what the New York Giants did was they've given themselves the flexibility to retain the players that they've drafted, and that is what the best teams do. You look at the Green Bay Packers. When do they sign big free agents? They use their cap space to retain the players that they draft. You win through the draft. And a lot of people look at the New York Giants draft picks and say, well, they can't draft. Well, I think it's hard to assess whether or not the New York Giants can't draft when these players got drafted into a poor environment to begin with, being that the New York Giants knocked everything down. And we're going to need to continue to assess players like Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones, Dexter Lawrence, and Andrew Thomas going forward and find out whether or not they're in the long-term plans. But the Packers don't go out there and splurge. The Steelers don't go out there and splurge. The Patriots may sign a piece here or there, which is fine, but they don't go out there and splurge. You look at all the big players that they let hit free agency. The teams that remain consistently good, even the Ravens, maybe a piece here or there, but the teams that remain consistently good use that money to retain their players. And the New York Giants, what they've done is set themselves up to be able to retain their players and still give themselves cap flexibility going forward. And next year's cap space is all you need to see. Next year, that number right there is what they have, $76 million of cap space. If you look at the top, that is based off a $209 million market. And that's because the Giants have signed guys to short-term contracts. Blake Martinez, James Bradbury, like I said, Logan Ryan, all those guys, those are 3-year deals. You don't want to overcommit yourself to 5-year deals, and it's what the New York Giants need to do in this year's free agency. But I'm going to talk about the approach that I think they need to take based off Diana Rossini's tweet. But that's $76 million with still the Nate Solder and Golden Tate contract, so you're talking more along the lines of about $100 million. Now, of course, you're going to have players to potentially retain like Jabril Peppers, Evan Ingram, who I don't think will retain, possibly extending guys like Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones. But regardless, they're going to have wiggle room, and they're going to need to maintain that wiggle room to keep bringing back the players that they drafted and add a piece here and there to maintain dominance, which is what the goal is going to be for the New York Giants as we get back to relevancy. But you do it short, you do it in small incremental steps with free agency. You don't go out there and sign 3 or 4 big free agents. And yeah, the Giants are 19th in cap space this year, but it's because they spent a little bit last year on 3-year deals to get this defense back to where it needed to be. I love where the New York Giants are in terms of their cap situation because they're set up beautifully long-term to maintain the players that they drafted. You almost have to look at it like a complete restart when the New York Giants started this rebuild. They tore it all down from scratch, and now they've set it up so they're going to be able to retain these players that they brought in via the draft and bring in players along the way. I think the Giants have done a great job. Well, yeah, when you look at the cap space this year, and right now it sits at about $5 million, depending on where you go, according to SpotTrack, there's a number of things the Giants could do to try to free up upwards of $40 to $45 million to try to do some things. That starts with Leonard Williams and Dalvin Tomlinson. But what I wanted to talk about was the tweet from Diana Rossini talking about what she had to say when talking to an NFL head coach. Diana Rossini of ESPN tweeted out just this. Just texted with an NFL head coach about the upcoming cuts and what he expects. It's going to be a massacre the next few weeks around the league. And what should the New York Giants approach be, in my opinion, based on this quote-unquote massacre? Well, here's the thing. It's about supply and demand. And I think I made a video on this about a month ago. What the Giants' approach should absolutely be should be what they did with Logan Ryan last year. Wait it out. And you may not want to hear that. You may want to say, go out there and get the biggest guy. Get Allen Robinson. Get Kenny Golladay. And I'm not saying ignore those guys. But more than likely, they're going to be franchise tagged. Let these teams with the cap space go out there and spend, because when you're the last man standing in a market, or one of the last men standing in a market that is flooded, we're going to have more free agents this year than maybe ever before, certainly in recent memory, because these teams are going to have to get under the cap. They were anticipating a $35 to $40 million higher budget. So the smarter approach here, in my opinion, for the Giants and really most teams around the league, and not every team will do this, is to wait it out. Because when there's more players up for free agency, high-profile players, Van Noy was just an example yesterday. You're going to see a lot more players like that that you didn't expect to be free agents. And when there's more guys out there than teams can afford based on what their market rate should be, it's about supply and demand. And as teams' caps continue to shrink, the Giants are going to get bargains. Last year, the New York Giants were smart. They waited it out. They got Logan Ryan on what, like a $4.5, $5 million contract on a one-year salary. He proved to be worth a lot more than that. The Giants gave him the extension before the year started. But the Giants are going to get players like that. Which players they're going to be, I'm not going to be able to tell you. But yeah, you may not get superstars by doing this, but this isn't basketball. This is a 53-man roster. And what the Giants should absolutely do, in my opinion, based on the circumstances, is be patient and be diligent. And you're going to get players that come to you for under what they should be getting. And you'll be able to fill in their holes on this team. Will you get a number one wide receiver going this route? Probably not. But if we're being honest, in free agency, we're more than likely not going to be able to get a number one wide receiver anyway. Maybe you could orchestrate a trade and give away a second-round pick, whatever it may be, and get creative with your salary cap to bring in a guy like Kenny Golladay or Allen Robinson. That's still possible in a tag-and-trade scenario, but you'll be able to fill in a lot of holes this way. You might be able to get a pretty solid cornerback, too, for $3 or $4 million a year if you wait this out. Maybe a guy like Xavier Rhodes or whoever. You name the cornerback prospect that you like. If everybody spends their money and people don't have a lot of money left, he can only take what's out there to be given to him. You'll be able to fill in a swing tackle potentially for maybe $3.5, $4 million for a guy that traditionally would get 6 or 7 if you wait this out. So the Giants will be able to fill out a lot of their needs on this roster in free agency, in my opinion, if they're smart and they don't go out there and overspend. And I think that's the approach the Giants, Joe Judge, and Dave Gettleman will take. And I think it's the approach they need to take. Yeah, maybe we'll get a number 3 or 4 wide receiver like Tyrell Williams or someone like that for $2 or $3 million. But then in the draft, you go out there, you get your number 1. Maybe we get some tight end depth, whatever it may be. A backup running back, for example. A guy like Wayne Gallman. Maybe you wait it out, you get him for $1.5, $2 million. The Giants have to be patient with this market. Right now, we have the 19th most cap space. Let the Jets of the world, let the Dolphins, let the Colts, let them go out there and bring in the big ticket free agents. We sit back, we wait, and we fill in the holes on our roster, which is what the good teams do in this league. And if we can't bring Leonard Williams back, we'll get a comp pick. But I still think they'll franchise tag him. But that was my thought process when I read what Diana Rossini had to say. Expect a lot of free agents in this market. And I think the smarter teams will wait it out. I kind of attribute it to, I don't know if you guys play fantasy football. I do. There's 2 different types of leagues you could play. You could play a traditional fantasy football league, or you could play an auction league. And if you play in the auction league, you would know as well as I do that a lot of people are smart with their money and the way that they spend it. And if you wait it out, you get players for $1 that most people thought would be going for $5, $6, $7, $8 before the draft started. I think in this market, with all the players flooded into the free agency market and less money to spend around the league, the longer you wait, the more you'll be rewarded. And hopefully, Dave Gettleman and the New York Giants take this approach. As always, guys, if you like what you watch, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.